Hey friends, beans are a delicious and nutritious addition to any meal. They are easy to grow in your garden and also help improve the nitrogen content in your garden soil. I grew lots of different beans in my garden at home and also at our church's community garden this past year. Today I'm going to show you how I pressure can dry beans in jars to preserve quick, easy meals that can be enjoyed all year long. So let's dig in. Dry beans are considered non-perishable and will maintain their nutritional value for years. So why go through the trouble to can them? Pressure canning dry beans in jars pre-cooks them so they are super convenient to prepare for your meal. To properly cook dry beans, you might need to soak them in water overnight and then cook them for several hours before they're done, maybe even all day. With beans canned the way that I'll show you today, all you have to do is open up the can of beans and reheat it for about 5 minutes. That's a super easy way to fix a meal, and that's why I prefer to can most of my beans. You can buy dry beans from the grocery store, or you can grow them in your garden, which gives you access to a lot more varieties, plus the satisfaction of knowing you did it yourself. Today I'm going to pressure can Red Ripper field peas, zipper cream peas, pinto beans, Blahilda beans, and California black-eyed peas. You can can different varieties in the same batch if you don't have enough of just one variety. That works fine, and that's what I'll be doing. I'll be putting different jars of different beans all together. We hardly had any rain at all in September and October, so I was able to let my beans dry right on the plants. Letting your beans dry before shelling them makes shelling a lot easier. Be sure to check out the videos that I made about how to shell dry beans. I'll leave links in the description to those videos that will help you be a lot more effective and efficient in shelling your beans. Okay, let's get started canning. First, make sure that all your jars and lids are clean. Since we're pressure canning, the temperature is going to get so hot that we don't have to worry about sanitizing the jars. Just make sure that they're clean. I prefer to use pint-sized jars because that's the right amount of beans for a typical meal in my family. However, you can pressure can dry beans in quart-sized jars as well. You'll need a good pressure canner. I use a Presto 16-quart pressure canner. My canner will process up to 10 pint-sized jars or 7 quart-sized jars. Don't worry though, if you don't have enough beans to run a full batch, you can simply fill up the empty spaces in the pressure canner with jars that are filled with water. You can reuse old mason jars and you can reuse the old rings, but you must use new lids every time. Don't try to reuse old lids because they may not seal properly. Other good tools to have are a jar lifter and a jar wrench. A bubble popper can also be useful, and you're going to need water, distilled vinegar, and non-iodized salt. Be sure to use kosher salt or canning salt. Don't use table salt because it may affect the taste and the look of your beans. Set a large pot of water on the stove to get it started boiling. While you are waiting for the pot of water to boil, wash off your beans to remove any dirt, inspect your beans to remove any debris or any misshapen or defective beans. Once satisfied, add 1/2 of a cup of beans to a pint-sized jar or 1 cup of beans per quart jar. You don't have to add salt, but I prefer to add salt. And you want to put 1/2 teaspoon of salt to a pint-sized jar or 1 teaspoon for a quart-sized jar. Next, you want to warm up your jars because there's a basic principle in canning with jars. You never want to add boiling water to cold jars or cold water to hot jars. The difference in temperature could cause the glass to crack or shatter. So we're going to be adding boiling water to these jars in a few minutes. So we want to do something to slowly warm up the glass. Here's two options you could use. One would be to place the jars in a cold oven and turn the oven to 350 degrees. Don't preheat the oven. Put the jars in the cold oven and then set it to 350 so that it will bring up the glass temperature slowly. Another method, and the one that I use in this video, is to put my jars in a pressure canner with about a quart of water and start heating the water to a boil without the lid on the canner. By the time I have a pot of boiling water ready to add to the jars, my pressure canner should be warm enough to be safe. And so we have heated the jars up to an acceptable temperature. I take the jars of beans out of the pressure canner and place them on a towel on the kitchen counter. Then I fill each jar with boiling water, leaving 1 inch of head space. Use a spoon or a bubble popper to remove any bubbles in the jar and to check to make sure that you have 1 inch of head space from the top of the water line to the top of the jar lid. My bubble popper has a convenient gauge that shows how to measure this and make sure you have 1 inch of head space. Use a paper towel moistened with vinegar to wipe the rim of each jar. This removes any particles that may keep the lids from sealing properly. Now place a lid on each jar and then secure them with a metal ring. Don't over tighten the rings. Finger tight is all you need. However, a jar wrench is helpful because the jars are too hot to handle with your bare hands. You can use a pot holder or a towel in place of a jar wrench, just something to hold it so that you don't burn your hand. Add 2 tablespoons of vinegar to the water in the pressure canner. My canner needs a total of 3 quarts of water for pressure canning. I've already added 1 quart to help warm the jars, so I'm going to add 2 more quarts, and I'm going to check to make sure there's enough water. There is a level mark inside my canner that shows the 3-quart level inside my canner. Use a jar lifter or a pot holder or a towel to place the jars in the pressure canner. If you don't have enough jars for a full batch, you can fill the empty slots with jars of water. This just helps keep the jars inside the canner from moving around during processing, which could break the jars. So these are just placeholders taking up space. Place the lid on the canner and turn the heat on the stove burner to high. Once a strong stream of steam starts coming out of the steam vent, let it vent for 10 minutes. Then put your pressure regulator weight on the steam vent and turn down the heat to medium. Wait for the pressure canner to rise to 11 pounds of pressure. Now, note, if you live at an elevation over 2,000 feet above sea level, you will need to adjust your pressure accordingly. 2,001 to 4,000 feet above sea level, use 12 pounds of pressure. At 4,000 to 6,000 feet above sea level, use 13 pounds of pressure. Once the canner reaches 11 pounds of pressure, you can turn the heat down to low and start the timer. Make sure you maintain 11 psi for 1 hour and 15 minutes if you're processing pint jars, or 1 hour and 30 minutes if you're processing quart jars. The pressure must remain above 11 psi for the entire time. After the required time, turn off the heat and let the pressure slowly drop back down to 0. Then let the canner rest at 0 psi for another 10 minutes. Then you can take the pressure canner lid off and you can remove the jars, but be careful, they may still be very hot. Use a jar lifter or a pot holder or towel and place them on a towel on the kitchen counter. Let the jars rest on the counter for 24 hours. Do not disturb them. You may hear the jars clink as the metal lids suck down on top of the jars, creating a vacuum seal. Hopefully, all the jars will seal this way. After 24 hours, check each jar to make sure it has a proper seal. The lid should be slightly concaved downward onto the jar and not domed up over it. If the lid pops when you press gently on the center of the lid, it did not seal properly. Don't worry, you'll still be able to use the jar, the contents of the jar. You'll just need to refrigerate unsealed jars and eat the beans within the next 2 weeks. Jars that properly seal are best used within 18 months. I've been blessed to lay up about 40 cans of beans this season. I'm so thankful for the abundant harvest God gave me and my family, which we will enjoy all year long. Sometimes it's easy to be thankful for the good things God gives us, but we should be thankful for all things because God uses all things for our good when we follow Christ. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says, "Be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you who belong to Christ Jesus." When we are thankful, it does at least two things. First, it acknowledges how we trust God, and we trust that even when difficulties come, we can thank God because we know He will take care of us and use even our difficulties to benefit us. Second, being thankful increases the joy in our life. We enjoy our blessings more to the degree that we are thankful. So if you want to have a joy-filled life, learn to be more thankful and express your thanksgiving to God and to people who bless you. So let's be thankful and let's get out there and let's grow and be fruitful.